Let's connect two things here on the second day of Hanukkah. The rabbis say that there will be 9 months where Ishmael rules the world. They say it in the Zohar and other places. 9 months. 9 months. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like the period of pregnancy, of incubation, of preparing for a beautiful birth. 9 months. And then we look elsewhere in the words of the sages, and we see that they describe the period of the Messianic era as the birth pangs of Messiah. Birth pangs of Messiah. That there is a birth taking place for the Messiah to arrive. So let's put the two together. What does that tell us? If Ishmael's going to rule the world for 9 months, an incubation period, he is the source of the pains. Those pangs, with a G at the end. That Ishmael was assigned the job to push out the Messianic era into the world. Now, those 9 months could be 9 months or 9 years or 90 years or 900 years, depending on how big your lens is on time. And no, like, who wants 900 years? Are you kidding? I can't wait. We can't have Ishmael running the show for 900 years. They can't even run themselves for 9 days without self-destructing, as we see everywhere they go. They destroy. And believe me, they believe in global jihad. And they don't think it's a bad thing. They think it's a God-given thing. And when we, the Jews, see it written in the Zohar that the Mashiach comes through birth pangs, and that the Messiah has a 9-month rule of earth. I almost said heaven, but let's call it influence. Then we have to connect the two and see that what we are looking at now are those birth pangs. These constant wars, these constant missiles in the middle of night, and old people are falling as they run to the shelters and getting hurt. More people get hurt from running to the shelters than from the rocket itself. And all they want to do is use it for more, proof to themselves that they're winning something. And all they're doing is causing fear. But for the Muslim mindset of a radical jihad projection into the world, causing Jews fear is enough. Because they're looking for a larger capitulation of our leaders through the fear. Because they figure it that way. But we know it's not true. Now, we understand also, we could ask the question, why does God give all this oil and all this money, trillions of dollars, to these, these desert nomads? Well, they're not nomadic anymore too much. There's a few out there. We get some Bedouin tribes. But why did God give them all these trillions of dollars? To cause pain to all the world? To overtake Europe and overtake any place that they go? They're going to use a combination of violence, crybabiness, and demographic warfare, where they just have more kids than anybody else until they outnumber them. And meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and these other nations are pumping money around the world to help build all these little fiefdoms. And then they're getting weapons from, of course, Russia and Iran. And next thing you know, we've got the whole world on fire. And that's what the Zohar also says. That all the nations will be fighting with all the nations. Those are those birth pangs. Now, why the Jewish people have to bear all of this and be the focal point? Well, in simple words, the Kabbalah teaches that the Jewish people are the ones who carry the Shekhinah, God's wife, the immanent presence versus the transcendent presence, which is so high and so far from our minds, we can never grasp God himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be God. He grasps us. But his immanent presence here in this world is attached to the Jewish people. It was assigned to Abraham from the time that he brought his son on the altar and did his own circumcision at 100 years. He made that pact. And all his inheritors, his children, would carry that divine presence. And what happens if you take God's wife and you throw her out of the house and you throw her on the street? You throw her in the dust, as the Kabbalah uses that phrase. And of course, what does it mean to throw the divine presence into the street in the dust? Well, it means to throw our spiritual essence into materiality to such a level that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is completely covered over, and we don't even know she's there when she's there. You know, when Moses came down from the mountain with the 10 tablets, it says that the people were afraid of him. They saw a horn of light coming off his forehead. Moses didn't know he had the horn of light. You can be connected to God and not even know it. And Moses went like this, he covered his face because of the light of his face, only when he realized the other people were afraid of him. And so the Jewish people carry God's wife. And if you abuse the wife, guess what? The police show up. I had a client who pushed his wife. The police showed up and he spent 3 days in jail. He just pushed her. And what are we doing to God's wife? When we go against the mitzvot, we're throwing her down further and further. So we're responsible for part of the action. Then what happens is Ishmael comes in and says, we're the people fighting the war of God. And they're not fighting the war of God. They're co-opting God's name to justify their violence and greed. And Christianity did it long ago through a process of events. There is a whole Jewish tradition about how Christianity came about. I don't want to do that right now. We can do that as a class. We will eventually when it's the right time. But they co-opt Judaism also by saying that they're the new chosen people and we lost the blessing. Well, who are they to decide that? Well, God made his promise to the Jewish people forever. So they also co-opted God in their own way, in a psychological way. Now, every human being has a spark of God. It just depends on how inclusive it is, how bright it shines, how just it is. See, because if you're unjust, you cannot claim to be the messenger of the one and true only judge. What kind of messenger is practices injustice and says he represents the one who is just? Doesn't work. And they're both doing it for world domination. We see that the Vatican ruled the world for a long time in the Middle Ages until there was enough revolution within each nation state of the time that the Vatican lost its power. And then the kings took over. And then the imperial colonial era kicked in. And then the king colonial era was overthrown by the Republican era, where revolutions were in the name of democracy. And now we see that those democracies have also been bought out by the geopolitical oligarchies. Ol in Hebrew is a yoke. I'm not sure what garchy is, but it doesn't sound good, right? So the oligarchies now are multinational corporations that have bonded together with a lot of other powers, and they're pulling a lot of strings. But it's not about conspiracy, my friends. We're not going to break the world, the yoke of people who are fighting for our bandwidth. People just want our hearts. They realize there's no point to kill people on purpose except the Muslims. Now, they want to just send missiles and kill people as much as they can. They don't care. But if you want to rule the world, you don't need to rule by murder. You just need to rule the mind and the heart through the internet, through the media, through words, false words spoken enough that people start to believe them. But we have the Torah. And when you have a hand on the Torah, you have the real words, the true vision of what's supposed to be. And what's supposed to be is happening. That there are forces causing humanity to give birth to this new era. We call it the Messianic era. We call it on the name of this anointed person, whoever and wherever he is, that he's going to be God's true messenger with the power to prove it and do it. As Moses did in Egypt, it's going to be a global redemption. And Hanukkah is the microcosmic drama that we use to understand the global one we're in now. It's not about killing. They just want to take away the Torah. No bris milah. Circumcision is a bad thing. You're mutilating the baby. And Rosh Chodesh, why do you need that Jewish calendar? Why do you need to sanctify the moon every month? And that's when the month starts. And why do you need Shabbos? Why do you need to take a day off? Those are the things the Greeks were against. Because you can rule people by ruling their culture. And that's what we fought against. And of course, usually what follows afterwards is a king that's a little more greedy and he needs to take more taxes until the people are fed up and they rebel. And that's happening too in certain places. It's going to happen more as the economies of the world squeeze us. Which there's also the squeezing of those birth pangs of Mashiach. So all of us are responsible for this process. The Jews, the Muslims, the Christians. The other people who are not connected to those religions, they're responsible for having a connection to the right guy, to the right representative, the messenger, the proper messenger with the proper message, which is that there is one God and he is king, and he's going to do what he knows needs to be done, but it's going to be according to our good deeds or the opposite. And so the birth pangs, that 9-month period of giving birth, is going to produce the most beautiful era humanity has never even imagined. You can feel a little bit in the air sometimes. And you know that there's hope. And you know there has to be hope. Because God has vested in us, in the Jewish people, and the human race, and this planet, more than any other place that we've seen so far. God invested in everything that he's done in this universe. But there's no place like home. You know? And there's no place like home on Shabbat, to be in your house with your family. You should be blessed to just enjoy what you've been given to such a degree that you realize that your family is the most precious gift you have. And Shabbos is the most precious time you have. And it's the time that you receive an extra soul to open your mind and to learn and to pray and to meditate and to share and to sing and to eat and drink and dance. And that's why Shabbos is called a little spark of the world to come. Because that's what it's supposed to be. That's what we were created to do. Because when human beings are happy, they are fulfilling God's purpose for creating them. Because God's nature is to be joyous. Then he looks down at the human race and says, oh, what's happening down there? We're going to have to straighten out the lines here. Set up some new fences, some new distinctions, some new healthy borders and boundaries. And it's happening. Look around you. And every time you see something bad or hear something bad, know it's part of those birth pangs squeezing humanity to bring forth something new. And I hope we're all there together. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom. Hanukkah Sameach.